Hello and welcome. I'm Garima, and joining me on the Dais today is Eithne Treanor. She's an independent professional media trainer, conference moderator, and founding director of ETreanor.com media based in Dubai. Ms. Treanor is a seasoned energy industry commentator and acts as the OPEC's official on-air conference and webcast moderator. Her experience spans major international networks such as ABC News, Sky News, BBC World, Bloomberg, and CNBC Europe. She has interviewed numerous politicians, dignitaries, energy ministers, and high-ranking business people around the world. Industries across the globe trust her with their most important events. I'm so glad to have you with us today, ma'am. Ma'am, tell us about your journey in the energy industry. What inspired you to be a part of this sector, and what has been your life before entering into this industry?
Well, the entrance into the energy industry, actually, it was quite comical, I suppose, in many ways. I was working as a journalist with CNBC, and the oil price was moving higher way back in the day. I know I'm dating myself a little bit here, but there was a time when they were looking at a price band mechanism of $25 to $28 a barrel. I know it's been a while ago when they were going to be very happy with that. So the television channels were getting very interested, of course, in OPEC. We didn't particularly cover it too much before then. And CNBC said, you've got to go to Vienna, you've got to cover this meeting and do live shots and bring us back like a good story. And I'm thinking, how on earth am I going to go to what is a closed meeting? They were quite secretive, not so much secretive, but they didn't tend to share as much information as maybe we would like. But more important than anything else, the meeting was a closed session. So I'm suddenly, as a journalist, been sent off to cover something that is not in the public domain. And we literally have to hang about, we have to chase ministers, and we have to come back with a story. So this was when it started, which was very funny. And also, while I was there, a colleague of mine who worked for Bloomberg, which I had worked with previous, but at this point, Bloomberg Television and CNBC were competitors and indeed still are. But I met him there, and he sort of owed me a favor because I'd given him an introduction to Bloomberg pretty much, and then he walked out of there with a job. So I thought, aha, you owe me. I said, so tell me, how do I cover this? What am I going to do? And basically his quick words of advice were, get to know the spokesperson for Saudi Arabia, for the ministry, and that is your key target. That's who you really need to know. And it was so funny because we were sitting having a conversation, and all of a sudden, who walked through but the key spokesperson for the Saudi Arabian delegation. And within minutes, I was just up and gone, introduced myself and said, this is our first time to cover this. You need to help me. You need to, tell me what's going on in the industry and blah, blah, blah. And it kind of went from there, and we became great friends, and even to this day. And I began to cover OPEC. And again, I sort of at that point really began to cover the energy sector. I was very much for CNBC, their energy reporter. I covered lots of other areas as well. I reported from the stock market in London on a daily basis, but my big focus became the energy sector. And here we are years later. And
that's amazing. That's amazing, ma'am. And ma'am, tell us a bit about your life before coming to the industry. How has it been for you? Where do you come from? And what have you seen over the years? And how do you feel about it?
Well, Garima, this could take a while now, but I'm going way back I grew up in a very small town in the west of Ireland. That's where I'm from. I'm from Ireland. And growing up, there were 5 girls and 1 boy in our family. And at the time, I don't think perhaps it was the most progressive country. In fact, I can say it wasn't. Mm-hmm. So the career choice for women was rather limited. And I sort of look around some developing countries and some emerging economies at the moment where I'm hearing this from a lot of women, and they're absolutely amazed when I tell them that story, which pretty much I lived through that at a time when the expectations, let's just say, were a lot lower than they are now, and that ambition wasn't really part of our growing up, wasn't what we were taught. And I suppose I was a bit of an oddball in many sense, because I was incredibly curious. I think probably from the day I was born, I never stopped asking why. And earlier in our house, it was pretty much when it would be why this, why that. It was either the will of God or because my parents said so. So that should have been a good enough answer, but it never was. So I was always challenging what was going on. And even at school, I was a very curious child. I always wanted to know why things worked and what they did and why various things were happening when I thought something else might have been happening. So I got through school. I went to a university in Dublin, and again, which was very funny, it was a prestigious university which I wanted to go to, and my small town school at that point did not get an application for it. So when I asked about it, they literally said, it's too difficult to get in, so don't apply. And for me, I think that was just the reason I needed almost to go, let me have a go at this. It can't be that difficult. And I did get in, and I did graduate. I had a great time at Trinity College in Dublin. And from there, I was in the US quite a lot. It was very easy to get a student visa to go to America if you were Irish. And I stayed on and did another course in television and did a graduate degree then later on in international relations. On the academic side, I end up with 3 degrees.
That's wonderful.
But, and then I started working in television in the US, actually. My first job was in America, in Chicago, with ABC News. So it was very, very exciting.
That's such an important message, ma'am, that how important it is to be curious, to ask questions, and not be complacent with what is thrown away on before us. So yes, that's very exciting. And ma'am, you have reported in your career so far, you have reported so many events. And which particular event would you say has been very striking for you, and why?
Well, I think covering OPEC is, it's been a real honor, it's been a real privilege, and it really gave me a great interest in terms of what's going on in the energy sector, particularly at that level. As a journalist, obviously, and I know this sounds rather strange, but we chased ministers. I mean, we would get together at the Intercontinental Hotel or the Grand Hotel in Vienna, and literally we were ready to pounce, so to speak. I mean, it's a bizarre spectator sport, I suppose. Many of the ladies drinking tea in the lovely lobbies of these fancy hotels would look in absolute shock when a minister would come in, and this horde of reporters with cameras and everybody with their notebooks and their microphones and all that going, what happened at the meeting? What are you going to do? What do you think about demand? What about supply? Where's the price going to go? What do you want to do? And it was, you had to be very resilient. And then if anybody has watched an OPEC meeting been covered, when you go down to the OPEC headquarters, and once they get started, everybody gets settled in, the ministers get settled in, and then they literally open the doors and they allow the journalists to come in. So you have to get there. First, you have to know who your target is. And so often there's old pictures whereby if you're the first in, it's almost like journalists then come almost on top of you, whereby there's pictures of many, many layers of people. It's quite comical. But it's so essential to get those last sound bites just before the ministers go into a private meeting. So I really enjoy that. And now, of course, that the tables have turned, so to speak, I do the live commentary for OPEC. So I don't have to go chasing them as much. They still need a little bit of, persuading that they should still do interviews, but I don't have to chase with the journalist pack, so to speak. But there's some fabulous journalists out there doing some great work. And it's a tough beat to cover the energy sector, but we see such great reporting around the world, and they really do a tremendous job.
That's true, ma'am. And ma'am, that brings to my next question. I am actually curious, how have you seen journalism evolving over the years?
I think I'm very happy that I'm not a journalist at the moment. It's a tough profession. It's very, very, very competitive to get into. And I think you really have to have, first of all, that sense of curiosity. This, I think, is absolutely number one in terms of wanting to be a journalist. You also have to have a healthy dose of skepticism, I would say, as well. Always ask a few questions, ask a few different people the same questions. Don't always just think this is the status quo and this is what we have to believe. It's always worth pushing a little bit further. But I do think it's a job that has got particularly tough. And I think when we look now, even at, we particularly look at America. I mean, I think what's happening with journalism, and we look at the treatment, I think, of really good, dedicated journalists, even at the president's press conferences and things like that. That's really, really, I think it's just quite sad in terms of what's going on, and that lack of respect in many ways. And the danger, I think, when we see a country like America demonstrating something like this, I think it then, reduces maybe the respect around the world, because a lot of countries had come so far, and a lot of emerging economies and developing economies had really realized, I think, the value of press freedom. So I think there's a bit of a danger there when we see people, be very blatantly disrespectful to journalists, particularly who are doing a good job and doing their job. After all, this is their job. They're the ones that are there to actually hold the politicians, hold the executives, and hold industry and government accountable for the people. And people need to remember that.
Right. Very true, ma'am. And if we look at the current situation right now, the COVID-19 situation, how are you looking at it? And what do you think about its impact on the oil and gas industry?
There's a lot of mixed messages that we're hearing in terms of COVID-19. And of course, it's tough. It's a pandemic. It is the black swan. Nobody thought this was going to happen. Of course, we look at smaller incidences when we look back, and they were, there was a lot of impact, of course, when we look at SARS and when we look at avian flu and we look at all of that. They weren't nice either. But I think people didn't perhaps pay enough attention that maybe they might have been warning signs along the way. And many medical experts and people have said, there was bound to be a bigger pandemic. But there's no point looking back at this point. We have to look at the situation we're in. We have to really encourage everybody to deliver stronger messages around this, because this is what people need to know. Right now, we have a world in many ways that's out of control. But the one good side, I think, is everybody is being impacted, and everybody knows there's something going on. It's not just in one country. So everyone is on alert, and I think people are being a lot more cautious, and they're a lot more careful in terms of the news they're watching and what they want to hear. And they're beginning to be a lot better informed, I think. And we're expecting, to hear stronger messages coming out of the politicians. I think that's what we're hearing from the politicians particularly, and the health departments, because this is not a political problem, it's a global problem. Things have very much come to a bit of a standstill. But also, I think a lot of people for once really realize what's happening as well when it comes to supply and demand. Because everybody is impacted. People are not driving. They're not getting on airplanes. Industry is not performing as it used to. So a lot of these issues, I think, have become a lot more clear to people, whereby in the past, I don't think people looked at the energy sector perhaps with the same eyes that they're having to look at it now. And also to realize its absolute importance. There is uninterrupted power in the hospitals. There's, ventilators that are made from the absolute best quality plastic that's out there. Lives are being saved because of the energy sector. And I think this is one thing too that is a strong message to send to people at this time.
Right, ma'am. And taking this conversation further, what do you think the oil and gas companies should really talk about? What should be their key message at this point of time?
Like any time, I think the oil and gas companies or the energy companies, and I do think we have to reframe the concept a bit, because it really is about energy. And even if you go back to the very existence of these companies, they've always been providers of energy. And it's providers of energy to the world. And while we're in a huge energy transition at the moment, the oil and gas companies are certainly adapting and adopting new practices and really looking at new investments and being part of the energy solution. They have to be part of the energy solution. Obviously, at the moment, we're seeing a lot more efficiencies coming into the industry, and at a time perhaps when we thought we couldn't get more leaner and meaner and more efficient. They've really been forced to think again and see what they can do, because we look at a situation of oversupply on the market and a situation of low demand. And nothing is really moving at the point. It's also bringing, I think, a sense of harmony to the industry, whereby everybody is really looking, and we see that global harmony that has come about, particularly with OPEC Plus and with OPEC, and they've worked at it for many years. So in many ways, the work that they put in over the last few years to design and develop OPEC Plus and to bring more countries into the decision making and more countries into the production ratios in terms of going up and down. This was a very, very wise move that has been in place for several years. And I think it's been a huge help to the industry right now, whereby they can call on their colleagues in Russia, in Brazil, in America. I mean, everybody has really become a lot more united and taken steps to make sure that, yes, there's less oil on the market. Everybody will suffer in terms of the income that's coming in, particularly for developing and emerging economies. This is going to be tough. But also for the international oil companies and the national oil companies, whereby they've been forced to lay off staff, they've been forced to make cutbacks. Nobody really wants to do that. Processes and procedures that will, I think, in the longer term, be very valuable to the industry. And many of the analysts I talk to as well say that, you know, every time there is any crisis, that the energy industry comes out a much stronger and more resilient industry. So that's what we have to hold on and hope for the best in this time.
Absolutely, ma'am. And if we compare the present crisis with the previous downturns that the industry has experienced, how do you think this one is different from the rest?
Well, this one is a global pandemic that is impacting everybody. This is not a financial crisis, although it's becoming one. This is not a government crisis, although it's becoming one. So I think what's very interesting about it, it's the big one, so to speak. Nobody was prepared for it. I think people will put in place a lot more processes. They will look back on this and see what could they have done in advance. And this, I think, then in terms of particular crisis management, you know, will serve in case anything else happens in the future. But I think we're looking at something very different. And also, sadly, we're looking at something that's probably prolonged a little bit more. When I talk to economists, they talk about the fact that we have to remember recessions are much shorter than, you know, a good, healthy economy. Recessions happen and then the boom times come and they last longer. And this, I think, you know, hope is not a strategy, and we hear that from many leaders and many CEOs around the world, but actually at the moment, it's something I think everybody has to hold on to. We hope that this will soon be over. We hope that industry and life as we know it will get back to normal. But also I think we have to look at the power of the consumer in this, and the power of you and me, and the fact that we can't travel and we're not out and about, and how this has brought the global economies really to its knees. People do need to get back to work, but obviously they need to get back in a very safe environment, because there's nothing worse than if this happens again. And it's so tough. I mean, I wouldn't want to be a politician at the moment. I wouldn't want to be a leader of a company or a country right now, because they're really, really faced with challenges that nobody expected. And, you know, well done to them. They're doing their best to make sure that they can keep their industry together, can keep their company and keep their people motivated and hopefully inspired for the future that will come, and it will be better.
Absolutely, ma'am. And since you mentioned this particular challenge is so unique, we did not know what's coming. And what do you think the role of digital media is going to be from here on, not just during COVID-19, but also beyond this time?
For the past, I would say 5 years, maybe even before that, the role of digital media has been growing day by day. I mean, now it's growing hour by hour. I think it's minute by minute. And we really see, I think, the impact that's happening around the world with companies, with leaders, whereby they're putting out their own tweets, they're putting out their own messages, they're being very, very active. What we're also seeing, I think, is a sense of unity in the industry, whereby everybody is using the technology, the video conferencing technology that we'd all sort of used before, dabbled in it a little bit, but it wasn't so important. And I don't think people thought it would become as important. Even the CEO of Zoom, the whole company themselves weren't really planning for this. But it has brought together, I think, a sense of unity whereby first of all, how we work going forward. People can work from home. At a time, I think many companies didn't even entertain this as being possible. When everybody has had to work from home, the CEOs and the leaders and the bosses of the companies are actually realizing this can work and people can get a lot done and productivity is good and it's there. And also, I think the fact that the CEOs and the leaders and the key people have been forced to work from home. So they've actually seen what many people have been probably telling them over the years, and they thought, no, it won't work for us, it couldn't work for us. And they really see, I think, that the technology that's in place has really, really helped us. And also, I think on the oil field, even when we look at offshore, we look at drilling, we look at all of that too. The digital technology that has been in place is really coming of its own, so to speak. So the oil services companies that have put so much effort and so much work into making sure that the finest digital technology was in place. We would certainly hope that this is to their benefit at the moment, and this will actually continue as many of these companies position themselves to as leaders in technology, basically, because this is what's always moved the energy industry, and I think it will move it further and faster in the years to come.
Right, absolutely, ma'am. And if we take this conversation a little further, if we talk about the digital and online presence of the oil and gas companies, they have been a bit apprehensive about this in the past. The approach has been very conventional and traditional. But if we talk about online presence and branding today, what do you think about it, and how do you think it is going to change the game for them?
The energy sector needs to be a lot more proactive. And I think they've got to realize, and many of them do, and it's a great dinner party conversation starter whereby you're going to have people go, absolutely no way. The energy sector can't be the most important. And they'll cite banking and health and everything else, to which I say, you turn the lights off and it all stops. The fun stops, when the lights go off. The disco does not continue. So we look at every industry around the world, and every industry is very much dependent on the energy sector. And I think we have to look at it in a more holistic way. It has to be about the energy sector. And in many countries, there are different stages as well. But the energy industry has to communicate better. It unfortunately has had to communicate when things go wrong. And unfortunately, I know, having been in the media, a lot of the coverage, has not always been the most flattering. And many of the CEOs have been challenged in terms of what's going on and how they communicated messages, all of that. And there's just a history that we can all look back on. And it's very clear to see that this has not been a proactive industry in terms of communication. It's been tough. And even as a journalist, it's been tough to move forward with that. We're getting better. We're getting a lot better. And I think we're seeing new leaders come into the industry, and they all realize that communicating a strong message and being very much part of the community where they live, where they work, and also the jobs that they provide. They want to be part of the solution, and they're making that very clear. And their governance level, I think, has, if we go back, even 50 years, even 20 years, it's at the very forefront. The health and safety, all of this is an entirely different message that's coming on a day-to-day basis, and that will come across in the media, because they're shifting. They know they're shifting. They look at the annual reports coming out of the International Energy Agency. We look at the reports that OPEC is delivering. We look at BP. We look at all of the big companies that are doing that, and they know that things are changing and that they have to adapt and they have to change. It's still slow, I think, in terms of the strength of that message, but it's changing, and it's changing for the better, and there's a lot more transparency, and there's a lot more openness, and we're beginning to see a new message emerge. But it's definitely something I think that we need to see more of. The new recently appointed CEO of BP, Bernard Looney, who's there, has, he's delivering a very different message, and it comes, I think, at a good time for the company. There's a new CEO on board. The entire board has really embraced what's going on in the industry, and they're sending a much different message in terms of the importance of the industry, making sure people hear more about it, also what they can do in terms of climate change, and the conversation is beginning to be more inclusive, and all of this is a good sign, but they have to speed it up, and they have to claim that space I always talk about own the space. The oil industry, the gas industry, the energy industry needs to own its space as one of the key influencers, so to speak. I mean, it is the industry that keeps us all alive and it keeps the lights turned on. And I think sometimes people don't quite understand that. So it's part and parcel of making sure that message is delivered with a lot more passion and commitment.
Definitely, ma'am. And now let's talk about the Own the Space program that you have started. I was about to ask, and I have been very curious about it because you are somebody who really owns your space. Now tell us about it.
Well, thank you so much. When we think about Own the Space, I have been doing media training and presentation training, communications training for many, many years now. And even as a journalist, when I would, interview CEOs and anybody else, there would be times, I think, when if I didn't get, a good answer with energy and with focus, I'd actually ask the question again. And so many times, somebody might say, but I just answered that. And you have to put yourself in kind of a humble position. And journalists, we have thick skin, so we don't mind doing this. So often I would say, well, I didn't fully understand it, so maybe you could explain it a little bit better. To which they probably looked at me and thought, she's useless, she doesn't know what's going on. But they gave me a much more powerful answer. And it was funny, when I was a journalist, many people would ask me if I did media training, which of course I wouldn't do. It's a conflict of interest at the time. But I always knew when I had left journalism that I thought I have to revisit this concept of media training because so many people have asked me. And again, it's about making sure that people have good messages, strong messages, and I say own the space. Many people say to me, but surely it's about own your space. And yes, in many ways it is. But I say you have to come to the presentation, you have to come to the party, you have to come to the meeting, of course, owning your space. And you do that by being very well prepared, being very confident about it, having that great energy that's there because you have the knowledge, and make sure that you share that knowledge. But then you want to go one step beyond that. And I've thought about this so much. And that's why I branded it more Own the Space. Because what you also want is you want people to listen to you. You want them to believe you. You want to influence them. You want to change their minds. You want them to make a different decision, perhaps. So therefore, you have to own the space. You've now got to actually infiltrate a little bit beyond you being confident. The minute you walk away from that stage, from that meeting, it doesn't matter what it is, but they're still talking about you in many ways. They're talking about your idea. They're talking about what you said. You may have left the conference. You may have left the country, and they're still talking about you and about what you said and about your idea and about your product and all of that. So therefore, you still own the space. And everybody can work on doing that. And it is so powerful. We all know when we've watched somebody deliver a great speech, when we've listened to somebody tell a great story, we remember that. And it stays in our mind, and it makes us perhaps behave differently, and it influences us. We've all been in that situation. There's a million conferences we've all been to, and we've listened to so many people, and we've totally forgot about them. But every now and then, people, they just stand out. And we remember what they said, we remember why they said it, and it makes a huge difference. And we know they absolutely sincerely owned the space. That's what it's about.
I have to say that it is a very, very strong message for me as well, a very empowering one. And I am definitely going to take notes. And ma'am, since we're talking about owning your space, how important do you think is personal branding and networking when it comes to this concept?
Personal branding and networking and confidence in the workplace and knowledge in the workplace, all of this has become so much more important than possibly it's ever been. Mm-hmm. We're in a very, very different world than we were many, many years ago. Digitalization in terms of messaging and communication has probably made it a lot more competitive out there as well. I think that's what we need to remember. And some people are very good at it. Many people have worked hard to become good at it. I can tell you, I saw people on the public stage maybe, or in panels and various things, maybe 1 or 2 years ago, and they might not have been great, but I have seen them work hard to make sure they're great, practice, and you just see them now, and they're they're professionals at it. They look great, they sound great, they've got much stronger messaging. So it's something that definitely everybody can learn. And I always say too that people have it anyway. And I listen to people and they go, no, we're very shy about this, and I'm not really a good speaker, and it's not really something I'm comfortable doing. And I often have to say to them, and I do this at a course every now and then, whereby I say, talk to me about something that you're really passionate about, or that you're really excited about, or something that's happened. And people go into this tremendous story and they tell us what happened, and they use their eyes and they use great body language, and everything is working. It can be something the government's doing, it can be sitting in traffic, it can be, but something that really, really annoys you. And again, they deliver an absolute wonderful, clear message, and everything is correct. So we know how to do it in both extremes. So what it comes down to, and I say to people, your job is what you do for the majority of the day, of your week, of your year. Now, if you're not passionate about it, then I'd be thinking maybe you might not be in the right job, but you have to become passionate about it. You have to think, what is it that I do? Why do I do it? And what does it mean for everybody else out there? And when you, I think, come to terms with the importance of the job you do and where it fits in the bigger picture, you are going to get more passionate about it. The one thing you have to remember is you know what you're talking about, and that's the starting point. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know, then you've got to go back and maybe put a little bit more work and effort in. But when you know what you're talking about, you then move it to another level and really make sure that everybody else understands. Because I always say there's only 4 things you need to do. You need to engage, inform, educate, and inspire. Yeah. So every time you do a public presentation, every time you have an encounter with your board, with your colleagues at work, make sure that you can actually hit those 4 very, very simple, but absolutely key areas. And then, how do I inform? And go on then to educate, but never leave until you inspire. Make sure there's something there that you give people almost as the big takeaway that's going to make them want to be on your side and see that you can be part of a wider conversation, a part of the solution they need. Everybody's got problems, everybody's got issues, and so often we hear people say, don't bring me the problem, bring me the solution. And when you think about it maybe a little bit more and a little bit deeper than you might, you'll always come up with, it mightn't be the absolute solution, but you're going to be able to come up with some suggestion because you've really thought out why it works and why it should work. So it's very important to take that time and put the effort and energy in there and, deliver your absolute best. That's what you have to do.
A very, very inspiring message, ma'am. And I must say that this is going to be the huge takeaway from this conversation. And moving on, if we talk about culture, workforce in the energy industry, how do you see it changing during the transition, during the COVID-19 crisis, especially in terms of people?
At a time like this, we are in crisis mode. And the key areas here, and I see many of the companies doing it so well, I think good, strong communication coming from everybody, making sure leaders check in with their teams to see what's going on, to see how they can help. Many people are in a situation where it's almost the double whammy. They're at home with their children. There's so many new dynamics in this, and it's difficult. It's not easy for anybody yet. Obviously, it'll be easier for some people who might have help, but it's not an easy situation. So everybody is doing their best to cope and to deliver a good job. And I think we're seeing that from people, and companies are realizing this. Hopefully, it will make people a bit more considerate going forward. And I really think companies will be a lot more open to looking at possibly, I think particularly for female population, because many, many times they are, they may not be the key breadwinner in the house, but they're certainly the key manager, I think, and logistical coordinator in the home. And I think everybody's beginning to realize that perhaps a little bit more. So people who wanted to work from home, to have that flexibility, and indeed it goes for men and women, the fact that they can have that flexibility to get their job done, and to get it done, it mightn't be done at 10 in the morning, but it might well be done at 10 o'clock at night. And, people are beginning to be a little more flexible in terms of the time they work. When people enjoy their job, they'll work at it in terms of working 24 hours and being on call. People like to segment different times of the day to do different things. So it's not really about the expectations. It's about when people are more comfortable doing things. Some people work very well later in the evening than first thing in the morning and vice versa. So it will build in that flexibility. And we're definitely seeing some companies already put in place the fact that they're certainly allowing more people to work from home, because they can see now that they can actually deliver. And we're going to be in this situation, I think, for probably a few more months to come. So that will definitely change. And also, I think we look at the refinement in technology and what technology is teaching us, how people are probably learning a lot more while this is going on. They're connecting a lot more. They're sharing knowledge a lot more, and they have to do it in a different way. And even when you think about the idea of networking, people are doing probably a lot more networking because they have to do Zoom calls. And I see this right across the industry as well. And what we're finding, and what I see in this too, is that people on Zoom calls are quite comfortable to actually add some value, whereby at a one-on-one event, perhaps that might be an industry networking event, not everybody is talking to everybody and not everybody is listening. So in many ways too, I think the technology we've been forced to use is making us, we've all got more used to it. We have to put our 2 cents into the conversation. And it's opening up people, I think, that perhaps, weren't as active when it comes to networking. And people are seeing the knowledge they have, and people are appreciating everybody a little bit more. So lots to be done, I think, in the next while, but there will be lessons from this, and there will be processes and procedures, I think, that we can take away. But personally, I'm so looking forward to getting back to a big conference. Okay. I'm missing that stage. I'm missing the buzz. I'm missing actually doing a panel discussion. I'm missing, the bigger picture, so to speak. So while we're looking at all of these teleconferences and we're looking at these great meetings and they're serving a great purpose, I still think the one-on-one interaction and the one-to-many interaction at a conference, at a big event, nothing quite beats that.
That's true, ma'am. Nothing beats that one-to-one, honest, in-person conversations. We are actually missing those. And if I talk about myself, a year ago, I'm somebody who was not even comfortable doing a WhatsApp video call. And now, yes, as you said correctly, we have been forced to get comfortable with these technologies. But yes, it is happening now. And I was about to ask you, how has your work life changed, and how do you think about work-life balance during this time, mental health, emotional well-being? How is it going for you?
You have to realize that I have been running my own business for probably 12 years now.
Yes.
So again, it comes down to a choice, and I absolutely love what I do. So I can do it morning, noon, and night, and I do. So for me, the work-life balance has probably become a life-work balance, rather the other way around. And it is something that I've always been able to manage. I don't have a family, I don't have children, so I haven't had to adjust and accommodate everybody else in it. I can, I can be on a Skype call when I want, when I need to be. I've been known to be on this machine at 4:00 in the morning occasionally because we needed to get somebody in another part of the world. I'm doing, my job has changed in many ways. I'm doing some interviews with ADIPEC, which is wonderful. And we're talking to key players in the industry, doing the ADIPEC Energy Dialogues. I'm about to start a new series for another company called Frontiers of Innovation, and not a company in the energy sector. So I'm very excited about that. We'll be launching that in June. I'm starting a podcast in June called, guess what? Own the Space. So that will be very interesting. But I've suddenly become, in many ways, glued to, it's the relationship of myself and my laptop and my computers has certainly changed. I spend a lot of time there. And health-wise, of course, I'm sitting for this one, but many times I will actually do it standing up. So there's a few key things that you really need to plan in advance. Make sure you've got good lighting, make sure that you've got, a good vision in terms of the camera, all of that type of stuff. My office is absolutely turning into a studio because this is what I'm doing. And also I've started doing media training one-on-one online, because it's actually quite easy.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I'm doing is I'm doing the Own the Space workshop, an hour-long workshop, and I've been doing that for many, many people. And I just recently delivered, I've done it for a few companies, but I've done it for a university group in India recently,
Mm-hmm.
and where there's so many people online, and it's interesting. And there, yes, I miss the camaraderie, I miss the buzz of being on the stage delivering something like this. But the chat boxes have been fabulous. I think all of the teleconferencing platforms, so to speak, have built in lots of different interactive ways to, connect with your audience.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as lonely, so to speak, as perhaps it was when we all started this a few weeks ago. We're all getting really used to it. We're getting very comfortable with it. And I think it's going to be very much a part of our lives. But I do miss being out and about. I really miss going to the airport. I was probably on a plane once a week, and I know it's the hassle of getting there and going places, but I absolutely loved the buzz and the activity around, getting ready, go to the airport, hanging out in the lounge, meeting a few people, even meeting people at airports. Because I travel quite a bit, I mean, that's actually been sometimes these random meetings of people I knew from years ago passing by in an airport that, you were least expecting. But it will come back, and I think we look at the big projects, we look at the big conferences that are in place. Many of them have been postponed until later in the year. Many of them have been postponed until next year, but they're on the books. They're still going to happen, but they'll happen at a time when the industry is stronger. And also, I think they'll be very, very important. They'll have a different feel to them, I think, when the industry comes back together to really look ahead and think, what have we learned? What are we doing? Where are we going? And I think everybody will just be, so happy, and they'll be rejoicing being back. So it'll be interesting to see the first energy conference that's, hopefully not going to be too far away.
Right, ma'am. And next would be, how do you visualize this post-COVID world after this crisis? What do you think about it?
There's a lot that we can learn from these few weeks of isolation. And in many ways, while we've been isolated, we've been even more connected, I think, in many ways. I have a few regular calls in with friends of mine that I probably should have had in place over the years. My friends in America, my friends in Ireland, in the UK, various calls. So all of these, and even connecting with family, we should have always been doing these. Right. Zoom has just mushroomed into this incredible facility, and not just Zoom, meetings and Google and all of this, the platforms that we have out there. They're not going to close down. And I think everybody sees the value. That's very, very important that I think we keep that connectivity. And also, even for training, that now we really know how to deliver training online. My next step, of course, will be putting training sessions online and actually having a course that people can go to and can just download, and they can teach themselves at home, so to speak. So that's another sort of product, I suppose, I'll work on. Mm-hmm. For media training, it's very, very important to be with somebody, because you have to give them that feeling of feedback and questions and body language, and all of that, I think, is essential. So that won't necessarily all go digital. I really believe we'll be back out there doing small sessions with the C-suite and really working with people in terms of helping them to make sure their messages are ready, and they have to look back, I think, on other times. And people's memories, they're very short, So we certainly hope we bring the good part of this with us. But, when we look back, it doesn't take that long for people to just get out there. But I think it also shows the value we have on interpersonal connectivity and actually just meeting people. We desperately, I think as humans, we need that connection. Mm-hmm. And we want to see people, and we want to be there with them, and we want to have that experience, and we want to share it with them. We want to have the conversations, be they one-on-one, be they wider conversations. But I really do believe people miss that. But once we do get back to whatever is normal, we'll bring, I think, some of the learnings of this, because of the length of this. Mm-hmm. I think we look at other crisis times, and it has not been so long. So everybody understands, and everybody, no matter who you are, no matter how much money you have, no matter what your job is, no matter what age you are, everybody has been involved in this crisis. So I think the world takes on, perhaps, and hopefully will bring with it a lot of learnings and bring them into, that brighter future that we're all waiting for and we're all ready for, and we're all, just getting excited to get back to work and get back to, being with people and get back to whatever it is. I don't like the term new normal, but whatever it will be a bit different, I think, but hopefully it will be stronger and better for everybody.
Very true, ma'am. We all are looking forward to it. Let's see what it has in store for us. And ma'am, now this is a very important question, and I've been meaning to ask you this, that when we talk about the role of journalists with respect to the industry being portrayed in a negative light, how important do you feel is the role of writers, journalists, and commentators? What do you think about this?
The role of journalists in any industry, I think, has been absolutely essential. And when we look at the industries, particularly the business journalists in many ways, and my career with Bloomberg and with CNBC was very much more focused, obviously, on business news. I had worked at BBC and Sky as a more general journalist, and then made that transition to actually go to Bloomberg to help them set up their European television channel. So I pulled away from being a journalist for a while, but worked with the journalists, of course, to help get that set up. And now, of course, we look at Bloomberg, it's an international channel. So I'm very proud to have had a great part in setting up the European operation there. And then I went back to being a journalist with CNBC. Business of oil and gas is absolutely vital, and it's essential that that message is conveyed. Unfortunately, I think in the past, the oil and gas companies particularly were probably more reactive rather than proactive. And if one thing and one message I send to the industry is they have to be proactive. And they're getting better. And they're putting an awful lot of emphasis on their key public relations directors and the companies that they work with, and making sure that they're building stronger messages. And particularly, I think, being more available and being more transparent. We see it with so many of the oil and gas executives. They really are, they're very generous with their times. And you've got to remember too, they have huge companies to run. Years ago, they could all appoint a spokesperson. This is no longer the case. And when we think of it, there's a lot more pressure on them to be on top of every part of their company, every element, every area, and they have to really become a bit more expert, I think, in this. And also when we look at the scientists, we look at the engineers, these might have been people who naturally maybe weren't the best speakers. They could convey their message to their colleagues very well. But now they actually have to be on site, and they need to be conveying this message to everybody else. And always I say to people, if you're at a conference, if you're in any public gathering, and sometimes even at a gathering where there might be the Chatham House rule, we're still finding people are tweeting messages out. But at any public gathering, I say to people, use it and look on it as you may as well be talking to a journalist. So make sure what you're saying is fit to print, so to speak, because somebody out there is listening. And everybody has become their own little journalist, so to speak, so anything can be tweeted out of a message, and make sure you're being very clear. That's the other thing, be very clear about what you're saying. I always say to people, and particularly the scientists and the engineering community, to, make your message clear, make it relevant. And some people think, yes, but it's very technical. And I say, yes, of course it is. But always remember these two little words. When you're telling us about a new product and about new discovery, it doesn't matter what it is. I say there's two questions you should ask yourself. You should ask yourself, so what? And be able to answer that one with great clarity. And the next one you need to ask yourself is, who cares? And when you put these two little questions, like a little bird on your shoulder, when you're talking about anything, and it may be a great scientific breakthrough, actually ask yourself, and it could be the next new breakthrough in technology, or it might be quite intricate in terms of what you're going to talk about. But ask yourself, so what? What does it mean? And always, always ask yourself, who cares? Because make sure that other people about and how it impacts other people, particularly how it impacts, yes, your community, yes, your company, but how does it impact people? Because that's really, I think, that's all that's on everybody's mind who's listening to you. They sit in the audience and they go, so what, and who cares? So be a step ahead and make sure you can answer those two questions. And then you will deliver much stronger messaging, much more informed and engaging messaging, so everybody can actually understand what you're talking about and what it means to them.
That is so valuable, ma'am. Thank you so much for sharing this with me. And now let's just forget everything. Let's forget COVID-19. Let's forget oil and gas and everything else. How has the journey been for you, and how do you look back on your journey now? And what new milestones are you looking forward to?
Oh, I have a few new milestones. I mean, I always have a few milestones, and I think it's come from that sense of curiosity that just there's a lot of things I haven't done yet. Looking back, I suppose if I were to, somebody asked me this recently, what would you tell your sort of younger self? And probably the one thing I would say is don't overthink things. Don't overthink things. And don't consult with too many people.
Right.
We often find the gut reaction that we have and the decision we make ourselves is probably the best one. And really think about the times that you consult with a few people and ask them about this and that and the other. When I moved to Dubai, oh gosh, what was it? It was about 14 years ago now. I didn't consult with anybody. I made a decision to move. And I can promise you, if I had had the conversation about, what do you think if I was going to move to Dubai and live in the United Arab Emirates? First of all, going there without a job, actually thinking of setting up a business. Many people think I came here and I had a job and then I segued into running my own business. I was doing a bit of work with CNBC, so it was more on a consulting basis, and I was still doing a bit of reporting, and I did some training with CNBC Arabia for their journalists. So I suppose, yes, for a few months I had some work, but I was just ready to make that choice. And I did it, and I did it at a great time, and it's been the best thing that I ever did. So I think when I look back, first of all, don't overthink things, because I probably did, and there's lots of things I didn't do because of that. And many people, they say, oh, it will be difficult, you don't have enough money, will you get a job, you don't speak Arabic. I mean, people will throw up a million reasons why you shouldn't do things. So I always say, don't spread the word around too many, because believe me, there's a whole load of people out there, many of them coming from a good place in their heart and not wanting you to fail and not wanting you to face rejection and that with. There's a lot of naysayers out there. Don't listen to them. If it feels good and it feels right and you've done a little bit of work around it, just go for it. That's what I would say. And take action probably a little bit quicker. I've been talking about writing a book for the last 5 years, as many of my friends will tell you. And it's getting to a point that it has to be done. And in many ways now, I have the time, and there's various scripts in place. I'm reviewing them right now. This will, I promise you, be ready by the end of this year, without a doubt. That's something, yes. And I should have done it ages ago. But there's so many things, when I look at going online with my digital courses and building a platform whereby I'm going to put more training courses online. This I should have done ages ago as well. So I'm not sure what I was waiting for, but this time of reflection, I suppose, in many ways, has certainly said to me, no time like the present. So it's about actually regrouping. And so I always say to people, if you really have a passion and a commitment and you want to do something, make a move and do it. Don't spend too long doing the same job. I think I did that probably earlier in my career, whereby I should have just jumped ship and be ready to go. And I remember once meeting a young television producer who came to the channel I was working at and said, I'm here for 2 years unless I get a promotion here in 2 years' time, or more money or more responsibility, whatever. He's like, I'm out, but I go to a better job, and then I can even come back here in a higher role. So people who think I was a little taken aback when I thought, wow, that's a bit ambitious. But then I realized he was so right. And what was I doing waiting around for 4 years in the same job, not moving anywhere? So you have to sometimes wake yourself up and think it's not just about staying in a career or in one company. Look around, look at what you can bring to them. Look at that exchange of value, I always say. It's got to be good for you. It's got to be good for them. And when that's beginning to happen, and I'm so encouraged because that's happening so much more nowadays than it did in my career. When we look at the support system that is particularly in the energy sector right now, it's phenomenal. And we look at the mentorship programs, and we look at the accessibility of the leaders as well. All of that has changed so much in the last 10 years, I think, particularly. And there's a real desire to see more diversity in every organization. It's a great time. The rules have been broken. We don't have to break them like we had to try, I think, so much back in the day. Now, they break themselves every day. And it's a really exciting time, I think, to be in the industry. They weren't as encompassing, I suppose, as they are now, whereby you may go in to do one job and you can end up actually impacting various other jobs and indeed shifting around. And the companies that are doing this, that are taking key people and giving them experience in different roles, this is also hugely exciting. So it's a good time, but I say to many of the young people out there, take advantage of it, but also, keep that one, you are 100% responsible for your career. It's not your company's job to make sure that you do well. It's up to you to really put the time and effort and energy into it. And I do admire the companies, and well done to all of the leaders who take a great interest in helping you along. But it's your career, and you have to be the one that actually gets out there and demonstrates that you can do well and that you're ready for new challenges all the time. It's not about waiting around hoping that somebody will do something for you.
That's so true, ma'am. And if I talk about my organization particularly, so yes, I used to write technical articles around the oil and gas industry. And then I realized I do not come from this background. This is not me. I'm putting my brain and creativity into something which actually I do not like doing. So I discussed this with my mentor and boss, that give me something to do which I really love, which is talking to people in the energy sector. Let me talk to them. And that's how the journey of interviewing people across the industry began. And here I am getting a chance to speak to you. That's such an honor, I have to say. And ma'am, you've made such great points in this particular response, that there are so many things we do not end up doing because we overthink them in our head. And looking forward from here, it has not been easy for you. If I talk about your journey, what I can gather from it is that it has not been easy for you. There were challenges, but you took that step. With all your heart, and you made a huge difference. And you are making an impact, and that is all that matters in the end. People don't look through the struggle, people don't understand the story that is there, but yes, in the end, it is your result, and it is the value that you bring on the table. So thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your journey with us and helping me understand so many little nuances of journalism, and for all those empowering messages. And I'm really grateful to you for joining us today.
Well, I'm absolutely delighted to be here. And indeed, I get my inspiration from so many of the younger people who are out there. And it's a real honor for me to actually spend so much time with many of the networks that are there. I get to talk about the industry. I get to talk about the impact in the industry. I get to, like you, ask the questions. So it's a real privileged position to be in, and we get access to just some fabulous people. But I think what we also, our job and our role is really to bring this industry, alive and make it relevant and make sure that people are listening. So every time I'm doing a panel or every time I'm talking with anybody, again, it's about making sure that they're in a position whereby that they can deliver a really strong message. But there's so many great networks out there in the industry. There's some great people in the industry, and I take great energy from that. So it's a great space to be part of this industry, and indeed to be part of the younger people who are here too. There's great inspiration with the great work that's going on. It keeps us all going.
Right, ma'am. And I wish you all luck for your book and the podcast. I'm really looking forward to the podcast, and I will definitely share the details of your website with the other members out there, the ETreanormedia.com, and we'll put the word out there. We'll do as much as we can to promote that. And I'm sure that's definitely going to help a lot of us out there in the media sector. And not just in the media sector, I would say anybody who's passionate about public speaking and entrepreneurship and different subjects that you are taking care of. So thank you so much, ma'am, once again. It has been wonderful talking to you today.
Likewise. Thank you so much. We'll keep in touch.
Yes, yes, ma'am.